Friends, Brian here for Yes You Can Play Guitar. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to do a little bit of a different video. Watchmojo just released their list of the 30 greatest male guitarists of all time. So what we're going to do is we're going to just watch it and we're going to have a little discussion. I'll give you guys my thoughts. They're my personal thoughts. And you know, guys, hey, the world's crazy. The world's fighting. People aren't getting along. It's crazy. But here we can all enjoy music together. We're friends. We can all agree to disagree or agree to agree, share our thoughts and opinions. It's all cool, man. Peace, man. Increase the peace. So I'm going to let it play. Of course, we're not going to get into any copyright issues or anything. So, but I'm going to let it play, and then we're just going to discuss it. I'll give you my thoughts, and it'll be interesting to see what you guys think. My first thought, as we're going to do this, is I think, okay, what is the criteria for this? We've talked about this when we've seen other, like the Rolling Stone top 10 list, all that other stuff, or top 100. What is the criteria? Is it technique? Is it songwriting? Is it just popularity? So no matter what, when we see these lists, we're going to get into that type of stuff. It's going to happen. So let's just go through it, and we might do a little bit of skimming for time, but let's check it out.
The Brian Johnson days, Young never slows down in his relentless quest to entertain.
So Angus Young, I think he's number 30. Hopefully I can keep track of the numbers. He's an interesting one, of course. You know, AC/DC. Oh my God, they're like timeless riffs. Very popular band. Angus is great at what he does. You know, for me personally, I was never a huge AC/DC fan growing up, but I didn't mind them. And you can think, as a guitar instructor for many years, how many AC/DC riffs and licks have I had to teach. So I appreciate Angus. I'm not surprised he's on this list. And you know, they've had some great songs, and he's very good at what he does. And him and his brother Malcolm, they came up with some great songs and great riffs. I'm not really surprised at this. I expected Angus Young to be here.
This tale likely came about because his one-of-a-kind talent couldn't be described any other way. Johnson was a consummate blues player that made...
Okay, so we're talking about Robert Johnson here with the whole, you know, Down at the Crossroads thing. That was a long time ago, my friends. And I got to tell you guys that, you know, even now, even sometimes doing reactions on my channel, I get people writing me and sending me links and stuff. There's so many bands out there with so many amazing guitar players now. It makes my head spin. Like, times are changing, my friends. At almost 50 years old, I think, man, things are changing so fast, I can't keep up, and that's true.
Not only that, his finger picking gives the...
Lindsey Buckingham, great guitar player, great composer. Should he be in the top 30? Again, it's what are we going by? They sure sold a lot of albums.
Slash. As a guitarist for Guns N' Roses, Slash is more than just a hard partying rocker. He's also responsible for some incredible...
So Slash, of course, he played for Guns N' Roses. You know, as a guitar teacher, how many times have I taught the intro to Sweet Child of Mine? It's a great exercise. It's a great picking lick for people wanting to work on their picking. He's super popular. I think Slash would be one of the first people to say, on it from a technical perspective, he shouldn't be in the list, but at the same time, he sold a lot of albums, wrote some very memorable songs, and a great guitar player. I'm not surprised to see him on this list. What's the criteria again, right? But I'm not surprised. Oh, he's a great guitar player at what he does.
Number 26, Tom Morello. Whether or not he's working with Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello is an outspoken artist and acclaimed guitarist. His story...
Okay, so Tom Morello, honestly, I've never been a huge fan of Rage Against the Machine. I think he has some talent as a guitar player. He's unique at what he does. He has some skill. Top 30 greatest of all time, I don't know about that. You know, he might be the first person to say, yeah, I don't know. He wouldn't be in my top 30, but all due respect to him, he's had a lot of success, and he's good at what he does. Would he be in your top 30? When I think of the greatest male guitarists of all time, I think of guitar players like John McLaughlin, Al Di Meola, Paco de Lucia, top tier guitar players, like technically too, like that's just me being a guitar player.
George Harrison. Can one of the Beatles still be considered underrated? George Harrison's guitar work.
So George Harrison of the Beatles, again, what's this based on? Surely it's not technical playing. He was in the most famous band of all time. That has to help. He wouldn't have been in my top 30, but I can see other people putting up an argument saying, hey, man, who are you? He was in the Beatles, man. So I'm not completely surprised that he's in this list. So I guess like popularity and album sales are kind of involved here, of course.
Number 24, Robert Fripp. Few guitarists are as technically gifted as Robert Fripp. As a key member of King Crimson, the musician steered...
Robert Fripp. So I remember when I was younger, I remember King Crimson. They weren't everybody's cup of tea. They're kind of the music that make you go, what? But he's brilliant in what he does. It's kind of funny that he popped up because I saw the funniest video last week. It was him and the woman he does these covers songs with. They did a cover of Blind from Korn, and it was hilarious, but it was good. So I can't really argue with him being on the top 30 for sure.
Number 23, Chuck Berry. Who is the real king of rock and roll? Some might say Elvis, but others would argue Chuck Berry.
Chuck. Chuck got himself into a lot of trouble, man. There's some wild stuff out there about Chuck. Again, yeah, you with some of the blues rock stuff, like Johnny B. Good and stuff. Again, I'm not surprised to see him in this list, but he wouldn't have been in my top 30 list. But again, what's the criteria? Like, it's all kind of subjective. I'm going to say I could list my 30, and a lot of people would argue and say, man, what are you smoking?
Number 22, Alex Lifeson. The progressive trio Rush excelled because each individual member was an expert at their instrument. Needless to say, Alex Lifeson has a masterful command of the guitar.
So Rush is interesting. Of course, I'm Canadian, so I might be biased, but hey, so what if I have two asses? Stole that from Kevin Neal on Saturday Night Live. Rush was always interesting for me because when I was younger, when I was a kid, I didn't really get them. Like, I wanted to like them, but I just didn't get them. They were a little bit out there for me, but then as I got older, I learned to really appreciate them. And of course, now I absolutely love Rush. I think they're a fantastic band. A good friend of mine plays in a very good Rush tribute band, and I always want to go down and see them rehearse because it's really cool to watch them play all those songs. Great band, amazing guitar player. He would definitely be in my top 30.
Number 21, Jeff Beck. With the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck first established himself as a force of nature. He then went solo and entered the pantheon of world-class guitar.
Yeah, Jeff Beck, I mean, who can argue with that? He kind of had his own style, too. Amazing, masterful guitar player. It's very sad. When he died a while ago, I did a live stream when he did. It was very sad. Probably would be in my top 30 for sure. He was an amazing guitar player. He has a song that I absolutely love. Was it Badia? Nadia? Badia? Love that song. Fantastic song, and doesn't surprise me. He definitely should be in the top 30.
Number 20, Carlos Santana.
Okay, Santana, I knew he'd be in the top 30. Obviously, great guitar player in his own right, and very popular. He went through a lot of popular peaks over the years, and I'm not surprised he's in the top 30.
Number 19, Mark Knopfler. We've all heard the phrase less is more, but Dire Straits' main man, Mark Knopfler.
Yeah, Mark Knopfler, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, one of the things that got me really into guitar was, in 1985, the song Money for Nothing that came out, that riff, that anticipation, the build-up, and then when that riff hit, it was just like the most amazing thing when I was 12 years old. And oddly, I never actually learned that riff on guitar. Of all the years of playing professionally and teaching, I never learned it. It's kind of weird. I'll have to work on that. Not surprised. Fantastic guitar player.
Number 18, Billy Gibbons.
Billy Gibbons, it's kind of funny because, I went through a phase in life where if it wasn't like shred guitar, sweep arpeggios, insane alternate picking, crazy legato, I went through a period, if it wasn't that, it sucked and I didn't want anything to do with it. So I remember I had phases in my life. It was kind of weird because I loved ZZ Top when I was a kid. Then as I kind of got more proficient on the instrument, I was really into what I was into at the time. I just wasn't really a fan of his playing. Now being older and a little bit wiser, he's just a phenom on the guitar, like one of the best of all time. Absolutely, he should be on that list.
Number 17, Yngwie Malmsteen. Okay, so remember how we were just talking about less being more? Throw that idea out the window for a moment, because that definitely does not apply to Sweden's Yngwie Malmsteen.
Absolutely. Think what you want about Yngwie Malmsteen, whether he likes donuts or he doesn't like donuts. He has been a huge influence on me and many others. He's like inspired generations now of shred guitar players of the neoclassical movement. Huge Yngwie fan. I remember, you guys know the story if you've been following my channel. I got my first guitar in '86. Didn't take guitar lessons. I tried to teach myself, and I sucked more than anyone could ever suck on the guitar. Until I went for formal lessons from my first real teacher in the city I was growing up in, and he was a huge Yngwie Malmsteen fan. He told me about like Yngwie this, Yngwie that. He met Yngwie at a famous club in that city. Yngwie came out. He waited for him outside. Yngwie came out. He was drunk, but was still nice enough to give him some pics and sign some stuff. But you hear a lot of different things about Yngwie. You can think what you want, but he is the king.
Number 16, Prince. Prince is a legend today for his work in the worlds of pop, rock, and funk fusion.
So, for anyone that has watched my channel for any amount of time, you know that we kind of really went into a super deep dive on Prince shortly after the creation of my channel. I was very ignorant about Prince. I knew he was a dancer. I knew he kind of played a little bit of guitar. When I was a kid, I was very young when Purple Rain came out. I remember the commercials for it and hearing the song on the radio all the time. Through the big deep dive, through some amazing Patreons too that have been such a big support to my channel, and doing interviews. A good friend of mine who's a huge Prince fan joined me in some interviews with some important people in Prince's past, including Susan Rogers, who is the producer on the Purple Rain album, Dave Rusan, who created the Cloud guitars, Scotty Baldwin, who was Prince's sound man for a long, long time, Morris Hayes, who played keyboards for Prince for a long time. We had some amazing interviews, and I learned so much. So it's kind of probably neat for some of you out there who are complete Prince fans, seeing an ignoramus like me going from duh to like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Amazing guitar player. He definitely should be in the 30 greatest male guitarists of all time. No questions.
Dimebag Darrell. Heavy metal, like any other musical genre, is in a constant state of evolution, driven by inventive musicians.
I agree. He absolutely amazing, kind of revolutionary guitar player for sure. You know, I remember when I first heard Pantera, it was 1990. I saw the Cowboys from Hell video. I had a friend who was always ahead of the curve with the new bands, and he was really into them. And sometimes some bands, it took me a little bit to get into them. It took me a little bit to get into Pantera, but you know, by 92, I was definitely a huge Pantera fan. Great guitar player, and I remember a good friend of mine who is also a very good professional guitar player. He went to see Damage Plan, a week before he was assassinated, and he told me some funny stories from that gig. But then when the news came out in December of 2004, it was so sad. It was so sad for me that I actually, when I was in Columbus one time a few years ago, I actually went to the Al Rosa to do like just a tribute video for Dimebag. You can see it early on in this channel. It was just so sad, and oh man, like, yeah, amazing guitar player. Just love Pantera, love Dimebag. He contributed so much, and it's just tragic the way the world, way things happen, you know.
Of a perfectionist, an attention to detail that makes his riffing feel deliberate and thoughtful, no matter how.
I was never really into The Who or Pete Townsend, so I'm not surprised that he's in this list. Wouldn't be my top 30, but you say tomato, I say tomato, but I'm not surprised to see him here.
Guitarist who isn't just happy to kick out awesome riffs, but wants to push the sonic barrier to the limit.
So Brian May, I'm not surprised he's in this list. I think he's an incredible songwriter and musician. I remember when I was young, Queen would play on the radio all the time in the 70s, and I didn't get them. I want to ride my bicycle. I remember just listening and going, I don't get this. And then I remember when Flash Gordon came out, and you'd hear that song, the theme song, it would be on the radio, and I wanted to see that movie. And I had an older brother and sister that were allowed to go and see it, but I couldn't go see it because I was just 7 years old at the time. And then many, many years later, probably in the 90s, I actually saw it on TV, and I'm like, oh my God, why did I want to go see this? But I'm not surprised. Total respect for Brian May. He wouldn't have been on my top 30, but you say tomato, I say tomato again. But I can understand what they're saying in this for sure. He's yeah.
Number 12, Frank Zappa. Genius or madman?
I'm not surprised that Frank Zappa's on this list too. Interesting pentatonic player. He was definitely a different cat who marched to the beat of his own drummer. Not everybody's cup of tea. There's been some times in my life where I've heard some of his songs and I was like, what? Dental floss? What are we talking about here? What's going on? But I think once you get Frank Zappa, you get him. I don't know if he would have been on my list, but I'm not surprised that he's on this list. So far, this is kind of about what I expected from Watchmojo.
Number 11, Tony Iommi. Were there heavy guitar players before Tony Iommi? Sure.
Again, I mean, who can argue with that? Tony Iommi for sure. Definitely has to be on the top. You know, I think for the most part, Watchmojo, they're doing a pretty good job here. You know, I know at the end of this, and I mean, I could be one of these guys too who argues, well, what about like the more technical players, right? Like, but top 30, are they going to name John Petrucci from Dream Theater? One of my biggest influences, but I think they're trying to make a balanced video that's going to try and appeal to as many people as possible. I get what they're doing, right? Because as a guitar player, you kind of have a more insight into things than the general public, right? So, I don't even have to, like, Eric Clapton's going to be mentioned, Eddie Van Halen's going to be mentioned, Jimi Hendrix will probably be number 1. That's just how it goes with these lists.
Number 10, Ritchie Blackmore. If Tony Iommi is the godfather of heavy metal, then Deep Purple's Ritchie Blackmore was nipping right at his heels.
Nipping right at his heels, but placed ahead of him. Again, I'm not surprised to see Ritchie Blackmore, a great guitar player. I'm sure if I came up in the 70s, he would have been one of my favorite guitar players for sure, technically.
Number 9, B.B. King.
Again, great blues player, legendary, phenomenal player. This doesn't surprise me. You know, if this was like 20 years ago and I was doing something like this, I'd be like, what? He can't shred like so-and-so. But I get it. So, yeah, B.B. King for sure. I get it.
Number 8, Randy Rhoads. Oh, what might have been. There's no denying that former Ozzy Osbourne and Quiet Riot guitarist Randy Rhoads achieved a lot in a comparatively short amount of time.
Yeah, like, I mean, what can you say? He deserves to be there. Another tragic story of someone who died pretty young, who, at the time he was coming out, like, where would he have been? What kind of stuff would he have done if he kept progressing, and what kind of songs would he have written? Would he have still been with Ozzy? You know, as another tragic story, but phenomenal guitar player who's influenced countless guitar players out there, including myself. Phenomenal.
Number 7, Eric Clapton. Clapton is God.
Eric Clapton, great songwriter, great guitar player. This might offend some of you. He wouldn't have been on my top 30, but I appreciate him, I respect him, and I get it. You know, I knew he'd be on this list. Definitely top 10.
Number 6, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan played traditional down-home American blues.
I mean, how can you argue with that, man? SRV, The King, definitely would be in my top 30. Amazing guitar player. You know, if you're not into that genre or whatever, but, you know, when you spend the time to learn the nuances and some of the techniques and playing, it really opens up your eyes. You know, I used to be a very, very closed-minded musician, and just one of the greats of all time. Definitely deserves to be there. Another really tragic story of someone who died pretty young. How old was he? 36 when he died? I remember I was really, really into guitar. Had gotten really into guitar by that point, and all the guitar magazines. You can't see here, I have quite the collection. I've got totes of guitar magazines. It's not up on display too. At that time, I'm thinking August of 1990, July 1990. That's when it was in all the guitar magazines. Very sad stuff.
Number 5, Keith Richards. Sometimes the best riffs are the simplest and most immediate.
Keith Richards, again, I'm not surprised that he's in this list. I never really got the Rolling Stones. I was never really a fan, so he wouldn't have been in my top 30, but, you know, one of the most popular bands in the world for decades. Doesn't surprise me. So, is he in your top 30?
Number 4, David Gilmour.
Yeah, so David Gilmour, I mean, come on. Come on, David Gilmour. Like, you know, Pink Floyd is another one of those bands. It's such a metalhead as a teenager. When I saw the kids coming to school wearing the Pink Floyd shirts, I knew I couldn't beat them up. So what I would do is I'd wait till they came out for football tryouts and then try and decapitate them in front of everybody. I didn't get Pink Floyd when I was younger. I wasn't into smoking anything. But as I got older, again, I really opened up my mind and my musical palette, and they're absolutely incredible band.
Number 3, Eddie Van Halen.
What can you say about Eddie Van Halen that hasn't already been said? The King inspired so many musicians, was a phenomenal guitar player, and a great songwriter. That's another thing, too, I think people sometimes forget about him. I'm not surprised. I know you guys aren't surprised, so we're going to move on. Eddie Van Halen, what more is there to say?
Number 2, Jimmy Page.
Yeah, Jimmy Page, again, I'm not surprised. You know, it tends to always be kind of the same people with a lot of these lists. Again, we'll talk more about it at the end. And, you know, I don't even have to. I already am going to tell you Jimi Hendrix will be number 1.
Number 1, Jimi Hendrix. His career burned out far too quickly, but this rock legend quite simply revolutionized the electric guitar. Hendrix and his band, The Experience, were more than just a bluesy, psychedelic...
Jimi Hendrix, of course. So this is, yeah. So this is going to be kind of like the argument with a lot of guitar players who see this list. It tends to be the same names in these kind of top 10, top 20, top 30, top 100 lists. And from a guitar player's perspective, this is what they're going to say. But were they the best guitar players? Were they really the greatest? Like for me, who would number one be? John McLaughlin? Like, how do you top John McLaughlin? Like, and now with this new generation, like I've said this in other videos, like when I was in the 80s, when I was coming up on guitar, like I had the great 80s guitar players and the guitar players from the 70s to draw from. But then the younger generation of guitar players coming up, I'm not so surprised when you see these amazing guitar players like Tim Henson from Polyphia, some of the stuff they're doing, because they have a wider variety of influences to draw from as the years go on. So I'm not surprised. But in a list like this, you're not going to make everybody happy. Watchmojo, I get it. They're trying to keep it balanced with kind of like the traditional, these are the best guitar players. Who are some of the more successful? They don't want to start naming these obscure people that nobody's really heard of. They threw in Yngwie Malmsteen to kind of keep the technical thing. Like, no matter what, you're not going to keep everybody happy with a list like this. I get it. 20 years ago, I would have said, oh, screw that. What the hell? What are they talking about? There's so many great guitar players that you're not going to get mentioned here. John Petrucci from Dream Theater, Michael Romeo from Symphony X. There's so many amazing, Zakk Wylde. There's so many amazing guitar players. You can't fit them all into 30 and you're not going to make everyone happy. So Al Di Meola, where's he? Steve Vai, Satriani, all these guys. So it's just one of those things. I think it's a typical top 30 list. I'm not surprised at the names there. I think they did the best they could, but my top 30 would have been a bit different. Maybe someday I'll make a video about that. What do you guys think about the top 30? What do you think about my opinions? Good, bad, whatever. We're all friends. We can agree to disagree. We can agree to agree. We can all get along here. It's music, guys. It's one of the few things left in the world we have that we can enjoy. Remember, guys, like, subscribe, comment, and also all the people that take the extra step, join my Patreon. It really helps a lot. Remember, practice hard, but practice smart, and we'll see you soon.